This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern. Every week we bring you conversations with authors about the books and research and other things that we like. And if you like us, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter by going to our homepage. That's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review. Scroll down to the bottom and click the big red button that says Patreon. Click and support us. Some of you have been doing this for months and years, and we simply cannot thank you enough. This is an episode in an ongoing series co-sponsored by the Sadie and Ludwig Kahn Chair in Jewish History at UCLA, and I'm delighted to be joined again by my brother-in-arms, Professor David N. Myers, who holds the Kahn Chair. Professor Myers is Distinguished Professor of Jewish History, as well as the Director of the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy. Hi, David. It's good to have you.
Hi, great to be with you, Gilad.
And this episode is a special one in the sense that it is not dedicated to a new publication, but to a review of the body of work and cultural importance of Elias Khoury, the fated Lebanese novelist who died last September, aged 76. To this end, we are joined by Yehuda Shenhav Shaharabani, Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Tel Aviv University and the Editor-in-Chief of Maktoob Books, a series of Hebrew translations of Arabic literature. He single-handedly translated a staggering 10 of Khoury's novels and was a close personal friend of his. Yehuda Shenhav Shaharabani, hello and welcome back to the Tel Aviv Review.
Thank you, and thank you, David, too.
So you spent a big portion of your second career as a translator making Khoury's literature accessible to the Hebrew reader. What made you think that he, in particular, is exceptionally relevant for Israelis?
Well, my first encounter with Elias Khoury was reading his Babi Shams and Diallo that were published in Hebrew. At that time, I was not able to read Arabic. So I read him in Hebrew. First time I read him in Arabic was with White Faces. It was called in English White Masks, which is a novel about the civil war in Lebanon. And I was, how would I say, I was flabbergasted. I was discombobulated. I was everything. I think that his writing I'm hypnotized by his writing. And I think that from that point on, there was no way back in terms of my relationship with the writing of Elias Khoury. And I continued incessantly because I was mesmerized. And over time, we became closer and closer. And then I realized the political meaning and cultural meaning of what we do, or what we did together as time passed by, and we became more. Our friendship became closer, and his trust in me has increased.
How did it start? I mean, that personal connection.
Well,
so you read the book, you were blown away.
I was blown away. I translated. It was the first book I read in Arabic from cover to cover without a dictionary, and I was so thrilled and so enamored with not with myself, but with the idea that I've read a full-blown book in Arabic. And for me, Arabic is I would say it is in Arabic called Shabah, in Hebrew, Ruach Refaim, ghost, is my ghost, with which I go, we talked about it previously, I go back and forth into the Arabic, sometimes I'm in love with it, and sometimes I was kind of rejected it, I'm talking about my childhood. So for me, this was a big achievement, probably more than any other, not any other, but other academic achievement or whatever. So I read this book and I couldn't resist. And through a friend, I accessed Khoury. In the beginning, he didn't correspond directly with me. He wrote this to this friend, Rav Zreik. I wouldn't sue him if it translates it. So I did. And then we met in New York. A friend of mine, Tzvika Bendor, was at NYU, and Elias was at NYU, and they invited me to speak in his, there was some event, and I came and we met together. And since then, he assigned me what is the next book to translate. So he basically gave me orders.
Yeah, so he became your agent as well.
I became his agent.
Yehuda, I'm wondering if, you mentioned our mutual friend Tzvika Bendor, I'm wondering if your understanding of the Arab Jew, which you discussed in an important book, served as an epistemological frame through which to read Khoury, or maybe even your subject position as an Arab Jew. Was that, do you think, at all part of what attracted you to Khoury, or which allowed you to read him in the way that you did?
Yeah, David, yes, certainly yes. The question is, in what ways? So first of all, when I wrote my Arab Jews book, my Arabic was very weak. And I think that the book drove me into a position to say, hey, don't be a hypocrite. If you're an Arab Jew, make this effort and at least learn the language. Because my Arabic was very weak, I had this dormant Arabic from home. My parents are of Iraqi descent, both of them from Baghdad. And I've heard this is my mother tongue. But, being Israeli and all this stupid kind of thing that happened I'm sorry, I have to say that, all these norms and values and things that drove you to be a proper Israeli back then in the 50s. I don't want to be anymore a proper Israeli, but back then...
You're doing a good job.
Yeah. And so for me, it was, a big thing to learn my mother tongue again, or to bring back my mother tongue again. And I think Edward Said is a model for that, because in Egypt, he didn't know Fusha, literary Arabic to speak, and he knew, the spoken Arabic at home. And so he defined Arabic as his mother tongue, but English was his first language. So here I make the same parallel kind of thing. It's interesting how you bring back your mother tongue with the help of your first language.
But I'm still interested why Khoury in particular. I mean, the literary value of it is obviously very good, but you can say that about many authors. What was it about Khoury in particular that caught your attention?
I as I said before the politics, I was mesmerized by his writing, and I've translated 10 of his novels. Some of them are shorter. That's 100-page novel. Some of them are longer, 600-page novels. And even though I've done all this work, I'm doing now one last novel that haven't been translated. This is Sin Al Kol, which it was published in 2012, 12 years ago, and he never talked to me about that particular novel. I don't know why. And it's a great novel, and the protagonist there dies at the age of 76, the same age that Elias Khoury died, and I wonder how prophetic it was, all this kind of thing when you mourn about somebody. So all this to say that, in terms of literature, he beats, he beats everything. I'm there. I'm enjoying it. I'm learning. It's great for me. Other thing is that I identified politically with all the things. To go through the Nakba, read it in Arabic, and mourn about the Nakba too as a Jew. Be in touch with your feeling, even a guilt feeling, even though my parents, didn't do the Nakba. As a Jew who lives here, who acknowledges the privileges in this particular place and time. So this is partly. Secondly, I tell you this, I admired him. Since I first time met him, I tell you something, I was in love with him. And I hope that my wife doesn't. And I admire him, and in many sense, I was his agent. He would tell me, Yehuda, I need for tomorrow to write an article. He used to write for the El-Quds Al-Arabi once a week.
A newspaper.
An op-ed. And so it was Hawara, and it was he tells me, please make me a summary where in Jewish history the word pogrom was used first. David, I should have turned to you. So I sit half a day, 3-4 hours, and do research with him. So he give you commands. I mean, you have to do it. Or call Amira Hess and ask her.
The Haaretz correspondent.
She was in Ramallah. Tell her to translate that article to Arabic and send me, because he has this journal. I was his agent, so I don't know. I was used by him.
Yehuda, I just want to say that I was similarly mesmerized. The first time I encountered Khoury's writing was Bab al-Shams. It was Gaeta's Son in English. And what struck me so powerfully was his apprehension of the connection between Jewish suffering in the Holocaust and Palestinian suffering in the Nakba. That was once a taboo subject to even speak of the two in the same breath. And fortunately, that taboo has been broken in many circles, including in Israel. The volume by Amos Goldberg and Bashir Bashir has had an important role in that regard. But I remember how stunned I was when I read and digested that line. I think it was the character Nahila, who said, "We're the Jews' Jews," which the narrator goes on to explain is what happens when, and here I'm quoting, a Palestinian finds himself face to face with a racism like that toward the Jews in Europe. And this realization and understanding that Jews too were victims finds some of its most sensitive renderings in Khoury's work, as well as in other prominent Palestinian and Arab writers. I'm thinking of Kanafani in Returning to Haifa, or Said, who used the notion of Palestinians as victims of victims. What's your sense of that connection?
I think that that's completely true. It's a major point in Elias Khoury's work, which intensified in Children of the Ghetto, where he takes Adam to a visit in Ghetto Warsaw. And there are 2 chapters there, one with the deputy of Anilevich, what's his name? I forget.
Mark Edelman?
Mark Edelman. So this whole chapter, a conversation with Mark Edelman. And Elias's point of view is he is against the denial of the Holocaust. By the way, he organized a petition of Arab intellectual in Beirut when an Holocaust denial event took place in Beirut, and they refused to. He and Mahmoud Darwish and other people. He was very much preoccupied and engaged with the Jewish question. This is in response to you, David. And sometimes I ask him, Children of the Ghetto is a title which is already occupied in Jewish history. And of course, this is part of the thing. Till now, when you talk about Children of the Ghetto, you get this ghetto and this ghetto, the Lydia ghetto, at the same times. And we know, we probably know, historians would tell you that analogies are sometimes very dangerous. And what Bashir and Amos Goldberg did is very courageous. I think the difference is that Elias goes into the Jewish question all the way and compares the Jews, the Holocaust survivors, to the Palestinians. And he says, as Edward Said said, I am the last Jew. So I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. I'm not this Jew the colonial Jew, the occupier. I'm this Jew who was saved from or went into their death in the Holocaust. So he uses the Jewish question to talk about the Palestinian question and the relationship.
It's impossible for him to talk about the Palestinian question, it seems, without talking about the Jewish question, which lends such enormous power to his writing.
Exactly. So while we say that such analogies are dangerous because, for example, we know that soldiers who came from the Holocaust and were Jewish soldiers in 1948 used to look at the Arabs, at the Palestinians in Lod, in Ramle, in Jaffa. Says they are living like in a ghetto, and the terms ghetto was not used as an analogy, but was used because it was discussed and used in practice, and not only by observers. See what I'm saying? The participants themselves, in this case the Jewish soldiers, used the term ghetto, and that's how.
I have to say, I'm actually very interested in that, and have begun to investigate that for research on a book. And one finds that that term in official Israeli documents, as well as the term Machane Rikuz, concentration camp, as a site where Palestinians were incarcerated. That almost unwitting absorption of terms, the actual terms. It's not Khoury's invention. These terms actually are used in official Israeli cabinet discussions.
The terms ghetto?
And concentration camp.
Concentration camp, that's a big surprise. I never heard of that.
Yeah, I've seen it once.
Yeah. Okay. No, Khoury doesn't say that this is his invention. It gives it a literary dimension. Another thing in Khoury's, which is very attractive for a translator, is that if I am a translator and I'm translating, let's say, Marrakech, South America, I have to learn his context, the word that he's describing. In this case, it was the other way around. I was in Haifa. Literally, I was living in Haifa when I translated Stella Maris, written by a Lebanese writer who never visited Haifa. And so he's talking about my world, kind of. So it's all upside down. It's a transposing kind of position. And it has many, many, many
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing about Khoury, and also I had the same thoughts with respect to Kanafani. Writers, Arab writers who wrote a lot about 1948 and about Israel in amazing, I wouldn't say precision, but perspication. They had this very deep and textured and nuanced understanding of the space, of the people, of the culture, without even ever visiting Israel, of course. I don't know how many Israelis they actually knew personally. How do you explain it?
He made Palestine into his literature, and his literature into Palestine, and that was the territory. And I think that there was a big. You're right. Palestinian Arab writers were describing the space and describing the Jews and seeing the Jews. I mean, Kanafani saw as Holocaust survivor, and so this is the whole argument that Elias tells.
Probably without ever meeting one, right?
Yeah. But when Elias says, look at the Israeli writers, look at the portrait of the Arabs in Amos Oz, look at the portrait of the Arabs in Aleph Bet Yoshua, and Sami Michael. Now, in his last book, he wrote about Hasut, his Sami Michael's novel. He said, how did he portray Julian Omer and all this? It's always in a way that is, for example, in Amos Oz, they cannot speak. The two twins, Palestinian twins, all kind of in Khoury, because he challenges the genre of the novel. And this is part of it. He sometimes takes text from other writers and plays with them. So in Stella Maris, for example, he takes the lover of Aleph Bet Yoshua in the garage. There's a scene in the garage where Naim is a Palestinian teenager who works in the garage. Here is Adam, it doesn't matter, but he responds to Aleph Bet Yoshua and tells me Aleph Bet Yoshua plays with his characters, Palestinian characters, in a manipulative way. So I am visiting this garage scene again and showing you how it should have been happen. And Aleph Bet Yoshua once called me and asked me, tell me, what does Khoury want from me? I mean, why he's talking me? And tell him that if not, you will not stop to stalk me, I will start writing about Lebanon.
Apropos complex characters, we mentioned before Adam, who appears in Children of the Ghetto as the main protagonist, the first baby born during the expulsion of Palestinians from Lida, and yet someone who seeks to pass as a Hebrew-speaking Israeli Jew, and indeed as a survivor, an infant survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. What was it like to encounter this character, who really is one of the most interesting literary characters I think I've ever read?
Wow!
What was it like to encounter him and to translate, bring Adam into life in Hebrew?
Wow, it's a good question. It's there's no one answer to that. I think that when I once said in an interview that Adam is Anton Shamas, Khoury didn't like it. He called me immediately. Somebody told me that I said it on television somewhere in Yaron London or London Kirschenbaum, and he called me immediately, said, this is not Anton Shamas, stop saying it. And I said, so maybe Heskel is Shimon Bar. I said, don't make this equivalences anymore. I don't like it. So this is kind of in terms of...
So basically you suggested that he based that character on existing writers, whether Anton Shamas, the Palestinian
sometimes
writer.
I'm looking for, some helps me to understand literature if I pinpoint into particular figures, real figures. but the point that David made is interesting because I made with Khoury an interview, or we had a conversation that was published in Hebrew in the last book that came out, Adam Bedmuti, in Arabic, Rajulun Yashbihuni. In English, it would be a person like me or something like this. And in this conversation, he tells things that he never told me earlier about Adam and the role of Adam and who is Adam. And eventually, Adam, the survivor of the ghetto, the firstborn of the ghetto, that was found on his mother's breast, who's under the olive tree.
His dead mother. His dead mother.
Right, his dead mother, and a blind man brought him back to the ghetto. This is a big story. The point is that Adam was about or wanted to be part of the society of the Jewish state and failed. And when he failed, he took from him the possibility of talking. He was silent at the end. Remember, David, at the end of the first novel, Ismi Adam, Shmi Adam,
sure.
My name is Adam. And then in the second volume, there's a narrator that, there's a term in literature for that, I forget now. And he's not talking first term. And Adam and Elias takes from Adam the possibility of narrating or the ability to narrate and give it to some other unknown narrator who we don't know who he is. And in Arabic, it's called Damir Mustatir or Damir al-Ghaib, who does not exist, he's not with us. And in that sense, he became a refugee. So the narrator might be a refugee that is not here, and he speaks in the name of Adam and not Adam himself. And he has all the time comments about Adam's behavior.
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I want to ask you about who is a political evolution, and maybe to spend some time on two things in particular. One is how did a Lebanese Christian become so invested in the Palestinian cause, both as an intellectual and also a political activist? And the second is, what was his take on cultural normalization with Israel and how it affected you and your relationship and your work with him?
I'll start with the second. He was against normalization, was very fierce critique of Israel and its, but he didn't apply it personally. I was his friend, and he respected it, and we behave in a way that characterizes a relationship. He was very, very critical of Israel. He wrote this Nakba Mustamirra book, which is in English, it would be continuous Nakba. The Nakba did not happen once in 48.
Ongoing.
It's ongoing and all this. Before he died, I asked him about Gaza. Is this ongoing Nakba or something new? And he said, "This is." He clicked to his position that this is part of this Nakba Mustamira. Elias Khoury in Beirut met in school many in elementary and high school, many kids of refugees, Palestinian refugees, in the camps around Beirut, Burj al-Barajne and other camps. So that was his first meeting, and he was when he was 19, he went down to Jordan to assault, where the Fatah headquarters was, and he made Abu Jihad, who was the commander. And the commander tells him, the Abu Jihad tells him, who are you? What do you want? What does a Christian youngster want here? Do you want to be a Fidai? Fidai is a guerrilla fighter, the Fidayun. He told him, and Elias told him, I'm already a Fidai. So that's the myth. I don't know, this is the first station. You have to understand his Palestinian identity. It starts there. Second scene I would use to understand his development or evolution of his Palestinian political views is that when he went in 70 after the Black September to France, where he did his PhD, by the way, in sociology. Oh. But we never talked sociology. It wasn't our common denominator. And he came back to Beirut in 72. And Beirut in 72 was something. Intellectually, politically, it's before the Civil War started. But even after the Civil War, there was... Anyway, he would meet there anybody, Ghassan Kanafani and Anis Sayer, and later on Mahmoud Darwish came, and they founded a journal called Shu'un Palestini, and Arafat chased them and sent. They were critical, very critical of Arafat too. By the way, the book that I first translated, White Faces, White Masks, was banned in the West Bank because it was critical of the Palestinians. So in that atmosphere, Elias was very aware and gave a lot of credit to his predecessors. So he would talk about how he wrote an article about Ghassan Kanafani, how Ghassan Kanafani created a nation from literature. He gave him, it was in Arabic. Anyways, that was kind of the title. And but he said that Ghassan Kanafani didn't have time. He was also a political man. He was busy. And that time he was also sick. Well, he was very sick. But so when he was killed at the age of 36, allegedly by Israel, he was very, very sick, and he wrote very quickly. So Elias says that when you read Kanafani, for example, the return to Haifa, you're in the first page, you're already in a midst of drama. And Elias says this is not the way to write about the Palestinian tragedy only. You have to go into the, on the sideway, not only the highway, and look at marginal stories, particularly sometimes, many times.
So, Yehuda, notwithstanding the difference that Khoury identifies between himself and Kanafani, I always ask myself, what would the effect be on the world if Jewish readers read Khoury, Kanafani, Darwish, Jewish readers in Israel and abroad? I often think, this is when people ask me in the United States, what should Jewish educational institutions be reading? I say, here's the curriculum: Khoury, Kanafani, Darwish, Habibi, Said. And
then they never ask you again.
and I'm used to that. Yeah, and I just wonder, could reality look different if Israeli Jews and Jews abroad saw the world through Palestinian lenses? And I'm particularly thinking of the post-October 7th world, when there's so much trauma-induced blindness about Palestinian suffering. Reading Khoury for me was so eye-opening in understanding, really for the first time, the extraordinary enormity and devastation.
David, I will surprise you that last week in class, my student, now almost Dr. Luai Watad, and I myself were teaching Palestinian literature in Tel Aviv, and Palestinian students hear for the first time about Ghassan Kanafani. And
so not just Jewish students.
Not just Jewish. Mm-hmm. It's very sad. It's very, very sad. And they get angry. They get angry. And even Jewish students who sit there and say, I never heard of it. And to some extent, I would also tell you that this is the story of my thing. That when I realized that the story is different than what I was brought up with, it really, really started the process in me. And I think, so in terms of the answer to the question, I don't know, I cannot speculate, but I know, that there is a demand for it among Palestinian and Jews alike. And I know how this knowledge. When I read, listen, I was a leftist, but this kind of mild leftist, it's like. And when I started reading in Arabic memoirs, autobiographies from 48, I couldn't, my whole perspective has dramatically changed, particularly considering what is the conflict, what is the world of 48, and how do we denied 48 in school and other things. So it's a big...
In that regard, Yehuda, I wonder if you see your work of translation of Khoury as an act of decolonization in any way.
Certainly. Chad mashma'it.
Unequivocally.
Unequivocally. And that's consciously so, because we I'm sorry to say our project as a response to colonialism, as a way, for example, we keep, for example, the original names from the historical map of Palestine in our translation. We don't use colonial language, or try not to use the colonial language, because the Hebrew language...
Such as what?
People... I don't know. I mean, it's like, sometimes I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, when were you here last time? And I said, I don't remember, maybe Tzuk Eitan.
Oh,
so
what is the name of the the operation in Gaza?
This is colonial language, for example.
Right.
I mean, it's
in 2014.
Yeah,
this is like
it's been a long time since you saw your doctor.
No, this is like the example I had in mind.
Yeah.
This is people that speak like this way, and all these terms, this terminology that being used, and it's awful. Or Hebrew, how do you say it? Making Hebrew the terms, the Arabic terms. So Harabait becomes
a Temple Mount instead of Haram al-Sharif.
Haram Sharif and all this. Mm. So this does easy examples of how we are doing an anti-colonial. But what we select to publish is also part of that.
The content.
The content of the book, the anti-colonial. Sometimes we cannot publish what we want or what we wish to publish. Sometimes we don't get permission, and we respect it, or we don't. I have 2 manuscripts in my drawer that I didn't publish because the writer hesitates, and I respect his hesitations. Because under these conditions in the world, is very delicate. These are very, very delicate relationship with the Arab world. One thing is that the money that we are using is not, formal Zionist money from institution and all this is private money, and it's very important for the publication of that series and the legitimacy that we get. So one of them is anti-colonial. One of them is that the funding is not institution.
It's not state-sponsored.
It's not state-sponsored at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Don't say Zionist, state-sponsored.
State-sponsored and institutional.
Thank you.
Maybe just to, we're getting towards the end. I want to ask you about his Khoury's legacy, and maybe he was a prominent member of a generation of Arab intellectuals that is slowly dying out. I mean, obviously they are dying out, but whether the spirit that they embodied lives on.
This question is in my mind all the time now because as I told you earlier, I just arrived from Paris, where there was an evening for the memorial evening for Elias Khoury in l'Institut du Monde Arabe. It was very, very moving and touching. The family was there, and I was asking myself, what is the legacy? What is this legacy? And all the people talked about this trio of Edward Said, Mahmoud Darwish, and Elias Khoury, that were a generation of people with political responsibility and firm political responsibility. And for example, Elias's relationship with him was part of his firm political responsibility to find out, to check the possibilities for a dialogue, not with, and so this has gone. And by the way, personally, I'll tell you also, Elias Khoury was a friend. So, if he said, when we were together in France, and he saw that I'm not eating properly, he would bring me food. This is, this responsibility of a generation, including that kind of responsibility. Hey, it's a different generation now. You don't find those kind of people with this kind of responsibilities. I don't see them yet. In the new generation, not in the Palestinian world, and not in the Jewish Israeli space. I think we need here to restart a society
from scratch.
And because everything is decomposing, and we as critical theories knew it and say that many times before, but when you're in it, it's a different story altogether. And I think that we need to restart a society of Arab Jews not in terms of being biologically from an Arab descent, but every Jew who lives here needs to be an Arab Jew. In the sense that, for example, in Maktoob, we finished yesterday a school where 20 students, 10 Jews and 10 Palestinians, simulated the joint sovereignty for a year through translation. So we spoke in a binational way, Hebrew and Arabic together. We did not deny the politics around us because sometimes said, "Oh, this is escapism." No, we talked about it through literature. You get a lot to talk and to converse, not to agree sometimes, to find out, and to build trust between people who are politically minded. It's not dukiyum, how to call it?
Coexistence.
Coexistence.
It's not the old coexistence.
So what you're doing, it seems to me, that it's a cultural simulation of a binational existence. I mean, it's imagining how that existence could unfold.
Exactly. And I'll tell you from my experience, with my Palestinian friends in that small project that is called Maktoob, how much I learned and how much we as Israelis are blind. Jewish Israelis are blind to issues that are so obvious otherwise. So you learn how to navigate yourself in a different world, in binational, multicultural, in the true sense of the word, and learn how to be a Jew in a new place where we need to restart our existence on this place.
And a good place to restart that imagining of a new society is to read Elias Khoury.
Thank you. I agree with you. I wouldn't say it better.
And to memorialize him. And with this, I'd like to thank you very much, Yehuda Shenhav Shaharabani, for joining us today and talking about Khoury and his legacy.
Thank you very much.
And also many thanks to you, David, as well as to Itai Shelem, the manager of TLV1 Studios. And now we've got a request because most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app and would like to ask you to please consider writing us a review. You too can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto a Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has more than 1,000 interviews by now, for sure. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and most important, join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from us here in Tel Aviv, goodbye.